call to order this regular meeting of the Page County School Board. Can I have a motion to allow Mr. Gubler to participate electronically?
I make a motion that we allow Mr. Gubler to participate in the meeting virtually or by phone.
Virtually.
Yeah, either. Okay.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Sullivan Smoot and by Dr. Painter, or Mr. Painter, to allow Mr. Gubler to participate virtually.
Mr. Gubler.
Yes.
Mr. Lansbury.
Yes.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Dr. Painter. May I ask why? I'm going to say no then. Mrs. Sullivan Smoot.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes.
Mr. Lansbury.
Yes.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Dr. Painter. Yes. Mr. Gubler. Mrs. Sullivan Smoot.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes.
All present.
Please pause for a moment of silence as we prepare for tonight's meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dr. Fox, do you have any agenda changes or additions?
No, I do not.
Can I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Painter and a second by Dr. Painter to approve the agenda as presented.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Mr. Gubler. Mr. Lansbury.
Yes.
Mrs. Sullivan Smoot.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes. Can I have a motion to certify personnel matters discussed in closed session?
I'd like to make a motion to certify that only personnel matters were discussed in closed session meeting, section 2.2-3711A18.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Sullivan Smoot and a second by Dr. Painter to certify personnel matters discussed in closed session.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Mr. Gubler. Mr. Lansbury.
Yes.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Mrs. Sullivan Smoot.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes. Can I have a motion to open pre-budget hearing?
I make a motion that we open the pre-budget hearing.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Painter and a second by Mrs. Sullivan Smoot to open pre-budget hearing.
Mr. Gubler. Mr. Lansbury.
Yes.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Mrs. Sullivan Smoot.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes.
Do we have anybody? Yeah.
Comment?
Anyone speaking on budget?
On the budget?
We have no speakers.
We have no speakers for the public hearing. Can I have a motion to close the pre-budget hearing?
I make a motion to close the pre-budget hearing.
Second.
A motion by Dr. Painter and a second by Mrs. Sullivan Smoot to close pre-budget hearing.
Mr. Lansbury.
Yes.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Mr. Gubler. Mrs. Sullivan Smoot.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes. Now on the 5.01 citizen comment. We have
One speaker.
one speaker.
Pam Law.
Right, Ms. Lawson? Oh, should I read this?
How are you?
Actually, Ms. Lawson, let me read this real quick.
The Page County School Board welcomes citizen comment during regular meetings. School board members do not respond to public comment during a meeting. All comments should address a matter related to Page County Public Schools. The school board will not hear public comment that involves an individual student-related matter, the disclosure of which would violate applicable confidentiality requirements. The school board expects that each speaker will be courteous, modeling for our students how one can respectfully agree or disagree with others' views. Speakers will address their comments to the entire school board and not to one individual board member, nor to the superintendent, a staff member, or the audience. Speakers will have 3 minutes to present their comments from the podium. Please state your name and your address.
It's Pamela Lawson, 2656 Fleaburg Road, Shenandoah, Virginia. I'm actually just got two things. One, I want to thank you all for upholding the executive order and just think that you guys don't get thanked enough. So I appreciate it and thank you. The other thing is I know in September and August, I had come with a concern of the no zero policy. And I thought that we had said like sometime in January, you're going to look that over. And I haven't heard anything and I haven't been able to attend the meetings. I do watch them, but I'm unable to attend right now. So I just kind of wanted to see where that was at. And I know you can't answer me right now, but I'll go home and watch. But that's all I had. So thanks. Didn't want to drop it off the radar.
We have no.
There are no other speakers. 6.01, approval of the minutes from December 2021. Can I have a motion to approve the December minutes?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes from December 2021.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Painter and a second by Mr. Lansbury to approve the minutes.
Mr. Painter,
Yes.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Mr. Gubler. Mr. Lansbury.
Yes.
Mrs. Sullivan Smoot.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda for personnel action?
I make a motion that we approve the personnel action under the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Sullivan Smoot and a second by Mr. Painter to approve the consent agenda.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Mr. Gubler. Mr. Lansbury.
Yes.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Mrs. Sullivan Smoot.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes. Informational items, the draft academic calendar 2022-2023 school year. Mr. Benson?
Good evening, members of the board. Tonight, believe it or not, we have before you the first draft of the 2022-23 school year calendar. I want to state up front that we have had a few groups provide input for this calendar. We at the central office have taken a look at what we can do, and we've also met with building administration. I know it is Dr. Fox's hope that she's going to bring this to the teacher council, and so we will get input from those individuals as well. And after tonight's presentation, we will share the draft with building administration so faculty can begin to have a look at what where we've started from. This year's calendar has 176 days in it, 90 days in first semester and 86 in second semester. There are 77, just 7, not 77, ACT or what we refer to as professional development days. I think it should be noted that on those days when teachers aren't in professional development, we've been giving time for them to work in their classroom or with their grade level peers. So those become teacher workday hours. There are 7 12/30 release days in this calendar. The first 5 of those come at the first week of school, and that's to accommodate the beginning with the fair week. And then the last 2 of those come at the end of the school year so that we can give teachers time to fulfill their end of the year reports and packing up of their materials in classrooms. There are just 2 teacher work days outlined specifically in this calendar, and both of those come in the month of January. The first of which is following the winter break. So instead of coming right back and having students right back following break, we felt it would be important to have a teacher workday. We had that luxury this past January with it being a snow day, and that really went over well with staff. The second teacher workday in this calendar comes with the semester changeover day. So as you see, if you're following along with me here, we are proposing that we continue with what we would call the summer work hours for 12-month staff. So that's the Monday through Thursday schedule with staff working 10 hours a day and Fridays off. The back-to-school schedule that you see in August is very similar to the schedule that we've had in recent years. So we are asking for 2 days of new teacher orientation, some professional development at the beginning of the year so that we can bring teachers and staff up to speed with any new initiatives that we have planned. Convocation, hopefully we'll be able to come together in person this year, but we'll be making plans if we need to do that virtually again. And then followed by some teacher work days so that staff can prepare for their arrival of students and parents for the back-to-school orientations. The first day of school, according to this first draft, is August 22nd. And if you're following along, you see there's a date on the calendar, and then the number following is the number of days, so we can kind of keep track of that. We are proposing, like I said earlier, that we would continue to go to school during the week of the fair. We did monitor attendance this past year for that, and we made accommodations for students who wanted to participate in the fair, whether that meant showing animals or doing a variety of things. We obviously excused those absences, but we did keep track of also the number of students, and we feel like starting the week of the fair is for the better of the entire school population. As you're following along, I don't think there's anything too much in the month of September. We do have an ACT Day at the end of the September month, and that again is following the kind of the model that we've had this past year or the past couple of years. It's kind of nice if we do some professional development along the way. So you see those days included. So we have one ACT Day in September and one ACT Day in October. For the past few years now, we have been given the 3 days at Thanksgiving, and I know staff are extremely appreciative of that. I know Dr. Fox and I discussed a couple of times, the school calendar is a selling point for Page County Public Schools. It's one of those things that maybe we can't put money in people's pockets, but it is something that we can use as an incentive to try and attract and recruit different staff. So we are hoping that this year's calendar would continue with the 3 days at Thanksgiving. At the beginning of the month, you'll see that we have planned a what we call PTC, that's parent-teacher conferences. The first 9 weeks ends after day 45. So this would be an opportunity for parents to come in and hear a little bit about their child's progress. And then we're going to follow that with Election Day. As we know, our schools are used as polling sites. So it's very difficult to have students in the building and for that to occur just simply from a parking standpoint. The school calendar is often, or the winter break, I guess I should say, is often goes one way or another based upon where the Christmas holiday falls. And as you see in 2022, it actually falls on a Sunday. So taking a look at, how do we work around that and what's, realistic in terms of, having students in school and being productive, we would like to propose that students go to school December 19th and 20th, so the Monday and Tuesday of that week. And what you see is, as you flip the page, you see we give a little bit of time following the New Year's holiday. Because New Year's falls on a Sunday this year, we would propose that we don't come back that Monday right there following, that would actually be a day off, November 2nd. We would follow that with a teacher workday on November 3rd. And so when you really look at this, you still see a full 2 weeks for the Christmas or winter break, okay? A few of those days come at the end of the holiday with some time off prior to Christmas as well. There is a nice natural break at day 90, and that falls on a Thursday for this calendar. So we give that semester changeover. That's really to accommodate our high schools who are starting brand new classes. And we would pair that with the first day of second semester starting on January 23rd. February, again, not too much going on. We do give another ACT or professional development day. And then that takes us into March. And we've already had some discussion about spring break. I know for several years, and under the previous superintendent, she was looking for a spring break that was consistent at the same time every year. And that has been historically the last week in March. To be honest, as we talked at the central office and with building administrators, I'm not so sure that matters to families. I don't think there's families basing vacations because of when spring break is falling for Page County Public Schools. If you look at when the Easter holiday is, if you were to give the last week of March and then you got to come right back and give time off for the Easter holiday, we spent some time discussing about when it makes sense to do spring break. We did back it up 1 week. I know we did look at our neighbors, and we know that Rockingham County has selected the week, or is considering the week of March the 13th. And I know Dr. Fox is hoping to have some discussion with teacher council about that as well. So that's something that we're going to be thinking about. We know we have staff that live in Rockingham County whose kids attend in Rockingham County, so it does make sense to try and maybe possibly match that up with their spring break. But that's something that we'll discuss with teacher council. In April, just to go along with the Easter holiday, we do give Good Friday. And then I think it's difficult for those that choose to travel or come right back after Easter. So we've made the Monday following Easter an ACT or professional development day. At that point in the school year, often that becomes more of a teacher work day, to be honest with you. And then as we move into the closing of the school year, you see the month of May. For the past few years, we've tried to have a school closing to coincide with Memorial Day. And if we were to do that this year, that only really leaves us at 172 days. And if we're going to be honest about the amount of unfinished learning and learning loss that has occurred with students, we do feel like that we need to go to school a little bit longer. And so this calendar does take us into the month of June. And, you know, I'm not going to say that wasn't given strong consideration, but we do feel like in order for us to really address what's going on, you know, we've got to go a little bit longer. With that being said, we've also put graduation on the calendar. We historically try to stay away from the Memorial Day weekend for graduation, and we feel confident that if we place graduation on June the 3rd, then we get that senior class working right up through graduation. Sometimes as graduation occurs, then they kind of feel like they're done, so to speak. And so this would have seniors kind of working up through the end. I'd be happy to hear any comments, initial comments from you. Obviously, as I stated at the beginning, this is a draft. And so we'll be working with a couple of different groups, including yourself, and we hope to come back for a couple more drafts. But if there are any initial comments, questions, I'll be happy to address those.
So I have one question on if we have to have summer school again. Yeah.
Mhm.
Have you taken that into consideration with the summer schedule that you presented here?
We do. We have. And I'll just be honest, we've already kind of outlined for this coming summer 3 different sessions. And I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Painter, I don't think it's a point of if. We know we're going to have summer school. We're hoping to do some things to be able to attract both students and staff for summer school. because that's an opportunity again to address some of the things going on. But yes, and there is time for that to occur.
Okay. And then can you go over the process of this moving forward? You presented this to us, we heard
Right.
feedback, then what's the process?
So the process will be, Dr. Fox will take this draft to teacher council. Following the presentation this evening, building administration will be asked to share this draft with all faculty and staff. Okay? And so what we will ask those individuals to do is, if you have comments at the building level for this calendar, you'll be asked to speak with the person who serves on the superintendent's teacher council, so that that individual can take that feedback back to Dr. Fox. And so when that meeting occurs, Dr. Fox will be collecting those comments, and we will come back to you at the school board with some of that feedback. And then we'll be continuing to kind of provide additional drafts. And we'll work to the point, presentation-wise, until we feel comfortable that that's something that, everyone has had a chance to weigh in on. And then at that point, we'll ask for some action.
Very good. Thank you.
Quick question. There are 176 days in the whole year.
Yes.
90 is the first semester. And
Yes,
what was second semester?
86.
86, okay.
And so the Virginia Department of Education says you have to go to school either 180 days or 990 hours. And we're confident that we will meet the hour requirement based upon how long we go to school, our daily bell schedule. So we would be asking for the Department of Ed to use that as our calendar component.
I like the process. I know this is a bear sometimes, but I like the idea of meeting with the faculty or the teacher council, and then the principal sharing it. The more information we have, everybody gets a chance to put their 2 cents in, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm not going to say we're going to get to a calendar that everybody likes. I
you
think
won't,
that's
no.
extremely difficult. I think that's asking a
But
lot.
the most important thing, you're given a good, sample here of what could be, and can't please everybody.
Exactly.
It's
I think
workable.
everyone will have a chance to give
Right.
their feedback on the calendar.
Good job.
Anything
Thank you,
else?
Mr. Benson.
Okay. Thank you.
8.02 fiscal year 23 budget update, Dr. Fox?
Yes, thank you, and good evening, Board. Tonight, I just want to share some information with you about our preliminary budget process to give everybody a sense of where we are and where we're going. Tonight is not about numbers. Tonight is just about who are the different groups that are providing input into our budget process and how it works from the state level down to our level here at the school division. And just a reminder, our mission statement and our vision statement are what drive our budget and drive everything that we do. And we just want to keep those in the forefront as we begin, because budgets can also be pretty contentious because everybody wants different things. The reality is we have a certain pot of money and we have to make it all work with that pot of money. But if we keep in mind that our goal and our purpose is to serve our students, I think we can all agree we'll get where we need to go. Just want to remind all of us about the Virginia Code, which has statutory requirements, not only for you all as a board, but for me as a superintendent, that we have a legal duty to manage and control our funds. We have a fiduciary requirement, which means we can't exceed our appropriation that we're given from the Board of Supervisors and the state. We have to develop what's called a needs-based budget, and that's where we look at what are the things that the division needs to support students and instruction, and then we build our budget based on those things. And then, as you had this evening, you are required legally to have one public session. I believe we hold 2, but just know that that's in statutory code, so we're meeting that requirement. In terms of roles in the different groups that have input in the budget, you all as the school board, your role again is to hold those public hearings and to gather public input. You have to submit the budget then to our local governing body, which is our Board of Supervisors. And you do get to provide some direction to me in terms of your priorities and what you'd like to see moving forward. My job is to actually develop that budget, and I'm fortunate to have a very good team that's going to help me do that. And we also have to make any compensation decisions as we go along. Our local governing board is our Board of Supervisors, and they appropriate the funds to us. So they're going to give us money, and our hope this year is that they're going to meet us where we need to be, because we know there'll be some increases but we're looking forward to having a very positive working relationship with our Board of Supervisors. And then, of course, there are the stakeholders, the employees, the parents, our education associations, our community members, our taxpayers. All of those people are very important in this process, and we would like for them to take advantage of the opportunities that we provide for them to offer input into the budget. In terms of from the state level, because we receive federal, state, and local funding, the governor's biennial budget was shared in December, and that was Governor Northam's, Governor Northam's budget. Governor Youngkin is taking that budget and may or may not make changes up depending on where he wants to go. One of the pieces that was good news is that the FY21, that should be the FY23 general fund budget from the state of Virginia, we did exceed the forecast by $2.6 billion. So that's good news for schools and other groups across the state who need to see increases. Some highlights from that released budget that are particular to education. There are right now about $332 million that are allocated for the standards of quality re-benchmarking, and I'll talk more about that in a little while. We are going to see that there's $268 million to support at-risk students in high-poverty school divisions to provide other needs for those students. We are seeing money now start to flow back into the funds that would assist potentially with some school construction and some modernization in terms of grants that could be given to school divisions. And then across the biennium, so the 2022-24 biennium for this budget, there is a clause in there for a 10% raise for teachers over that 2 years, with 5% in the first year, 5% in the second year. School divisions that want to participate in that, the state will provide us some funding for those raises, but they don't cover the funding completely. So we as a locality, we have to put some money into that. And in order to be considered for that, you have to give at least a 2.5% raise in the first year of the biennium and then the second year of the biennium. So at a minimum, we're looking at a potential commitment of 2.5% in terms of compensation for staff. Excuse me. In terms of the General Assembly and how they work through now the governor's proposed budget, they convened on January 12th. This is a 60-day session for them that ends on March the 12th. Those legislators are tasked with adopting this biennium budget and doing other things such as passing all the legislation that'll be proposed. The senators and the delegates can offer budget amendments to the governor's proposed budget, and then those amendments will reflect the policies and the positions of the new governor. And then what they call Budget Sunday is on February the 20th, and that's when the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee and the House Appropriations Committee, they release their versions of the budget. So we see what they've taken from the governor's budget and what they want to change, what they're recommending, how they're shifting things around. So we'll see the impacts of that on education funding versus how the governor proposed it. Excuse me. Then they do their crossover. So the Senate version goes to the House and the House version goes to the Senate. And then a passed budget, once they do all the things they have to do, and that sometimes can hold up our process. We do have a separated House and Senate this year, so we could potentially see some longer delays there. But once they approve and submit their joint budgets, they go to the governor. And from there, the governor can sign it into law. He can make amendments to it and send it back, or he can veto it. So we give all of that, not to bore you, but to share with you that this is an intensive process. It doesn't just happen overnight. So when we begin to share numbers here on our level, which we'll do next month, we have to recognize that at any point in time, those numbers might change and could change. We might be required to do other things that the legislator signs into law. Some of those become funded mandates. We know that a lot of them tend to be unfunded mandates in education. So we just have to be prepared, and you'll see our calendar. We have a lot of time built in there where we might be meeting and readjusting things. In terms of our local authority, the Board of Supervisors, they're actually right now in the process of developing their own local budget. We will have a joint session with them on February 15th where we'll just start some preliminary budget conversations. We're going to share some of this information with them. We'll share some of our priorities, talk about capital improvement work, and our ESSER funding with them. They then have a meeting on March 21st where the county administrator, she will share the proposed budget. The Board of Supervisors will have a work session in March 29th. Excuse me. They'll look at the tax rate, public hearing in April, and they'll look to have then the adoption of their budget with because our school budget is a part of their overall budget. And then they hope to have their final approved budget on May the 3rd. So they're working a similar process as we are, and we work it in tandem. And we, again, hope to have very positive relationships with the Board of Supervisors as we work through our budget process this year. This next slide is just some of the budget dates that we've put out, our calendar. We've approved that. You all have done all that work. I think the main thing here is to know that, we're looking at May 12th as when we need to have our final budget adoption, but there's a lot that's going to happen between now and May 12th. So we look forward to this work, but we also just want everybody to recognize that it's going to be give and take, but it's also going to be dependent on what comes out of the General Assembly in terms of the budgets that they produce. We wanted to share with you some of the influencing factors that you're going to see in this year's budget. And there's a number of different things, not only from the state level, but local factors as well. So at the state level, you have a transition of a new governor, and whenever that happens, there could be potential delays in the budget process. This is a new biennium budget, so there are also potentially things take a little bit longer as they prepare that 2-year budget. The legislative session, as I mentioned earlier, you have different controlling parties in the Senate and House of Delegates, and that could provide some confounding factors. And then the General Assembly could always propose new initiatives that could require us to have additional funding made available. In terms of the Virginia retirement system, which we use for all of our employees, they initially proposed an employee contribution rate reduction, which would have been a very good thing for us because that means we would have to pay less into that system. However, the governor's proposed budget has leveled that off in terms of making no changes to the rate. So we don't have to pay more, but we also don't gain any of the savings there from that. Our local composite index is reevaluated every time there's a new biennial budget, and I shared this with you back in December. Our local composite index did change, and a lower LCI for us means that we as a locality have to pay less. We have less of an ability to pay towards the education. So in that case, the state will give us a little bit more funding. Our difference there is not huge, but it will mean some dollars, and we'll break that out for you specifically in terms of what that means. And then currently, I mentioned this earlier, the standards of quality or the SOQ recommendations, the Virginia Board of Education is currently reviewing those. They set the minimum requirements for us in terms of what we have to do, not only with assessments, instruction, but also with staffing. And those are usually where we see the biggest changes and impacts because 86% of our budget is spent on personnel. Right now, this year, they're looking at some of the additional things that they might add are reading interventions at the K-5 level, increases to student support positions. It's all right. No worries. Okay, no problem. Increases to some of the support positions such as social workers, school counselors, school psychologists, school nurses. And then we all know that next year with the growth assessments that we have been giving, this year we gave 2, next year they're going to be adding a 3rd in January. So there are costs associated with that. So we're still waiting on that information to see what the final vote is for those SOQ recommendations and then what the potential impact will be for us in terms of cost. In terms of local factors, one of the ones that every year our budget is based on our enrollment. And we have definitely seen some fluctuations over the last 2 years. We took a hit this year. We were held harmless this year in terms of what was budgeted for the enrollment that was projected, they didn't take that money away. Usually if we lose students, we lose that funding. We have been told in the current governor's budget that there is a hold harmless clause in there as well, simply to try and still mitigate the impacts of COVID. We're hoping that that will stay in there, but I will tell you, we've decided we're going to take a more conservative approach with enrollment, because I'd rather end up with us saying we have extra and we can use that money in other ways than saying we're going to lose money that we've budgeted and projected. In mid to late February, we're going to get our health insurance renewal rates. So that could cost us a ton of money, or it could cost us no money. We don't know. We'll wait. We'll meet with our insurance folks and we'll bring that information to you. Just in general, we're seeing rising costs of operations expenses and different services such as utilities, gasoline, and other contractual obligations that we have. We see those every year, but I think we're going to anticipate seeing potentially some higher rates this year due to some supply chain issues that are making things not only harder to get, but also more expensive to get. In January of next year, 2023, we will see the next increase in the minimum wage requirement. It'll move from $11 to $12. So we want to build that in our budget to account for January to June of next year for that increase. We are getting American Rescue Plan ESSER 3 funding money. You know, we've talked about this a lot. We have about $6.3 million in funding, the bulk of which is being spent on HVAC work. That money is a good thing for us right now, a very, very good thing for us. So we're grateful for it. But we really need people to understand that that money can't take the place of local funding. If we use it to staff positions, say put teachers in classrooms next year, we have to then be able to absorb those positions in our local budget come 2024 when that money is gone. So while it's a good thing, it's something we have to be very careful with and make sure if we're going to use it in those ways, we have to be able to sustain it beyond 2024. And we're going to just continue to see the impacts of COVID-19, and those things will cost us money, whether they're things that keep teachers and staff safe or whether they're other instructional items that we might need to support students. And then we'll work with our Board of Supervisors on continuing to look at capital improvement plans so we can continue to look at our buildings and facilities and school buses and try to get replacements and upgrades there. And I promise I'm almost done. The budget process in terms of our next steps. Back in September, Ms. Seacrest and her team sent out budget templates to all of our schools and departments. And that's the way we gather feedback from them in terms of what are the needs that they're seeing at those levels. She compiled that information. It's been shared with me and our staff, and our priority lists are being developed from that. We are fortunate again that some of our ESSER 3 funds can be used to compensate for some of those things. But again, that all has an end to it. We are looking through all of those details and building our priorities based on those requests. We are holding ongoing school board meetings and hearings to discuss things, tonight being the first. At some point in the near future, we'll have the development and the presentation of the superintendent's proposed budget. And then once all those things happen with the General Assembly and the Board of Supervisors, we'll start making all of those refinements to that proposed budget once we have all of that new information from all of those different entities that will provide us with detail. So I think the lesson there is we just have to be patient. We have to wait and see and then figure out what those impacts are going to be once we get that information. So in terms of our preliminary budget priorities, we have a number, and obviously this looks like a long list, and it is. We won't be able to do all of these things, but we have to start somewhere. So we're going to start with a broader list, and then we'll begin to move that down based on funding. So primary is that we want to support, recruit, and retain qualified educators, leaders, and support staff. And that means that we've got to look at increasing the compensation for all staff across all bands. And we want to look at specifically some salary adjustments for our classified staff. That's been a mission for you all over the past couple years, and we want to continue to do that work. We also want to redevelop our teacher mentor program so that we provide more support to our teachers, whether they're brand new or maybe more seasoned and they might need some support. We have a strong program in place to support them. And then we want to look at different recruitment initiatives and types of ways that we can bring people to Page County and then keep them here once we have them here. We want to look at expanding career and technical education programming. And obviously, the bulk of that would be at the Page County Tech Ed Center, where we want to add some additional courses like electricity. You know, there was the wait list this year for that course. We want to be able to add that course or more slots in that course. So that means not only a teacher, but we also then have to have the facility, the space for it, and then you've got to have the materials and the supplies to do that. We also want to look at, expanding our work-based learning coordinator types, maybe have a position to do that work, but also to look at the options that we provide for students in the area of work-based learning that leads to career opportunities for those students. We want to look at student and teacher support in the areas of mental health and behaviors. Obviously, we know this year has been very, very challenging in a number of ways, not only for the mental health, but also in the behaviors. So we want to look at adding some potential positions there. One being a social worker to help us make those connections with families and the community and provide those resources. Behavior specialists that can help teachers work through and navigate different student behaviors so that those kids can stay in class, but they aren't disrupting instruction. It's 'cause snow's coming.
That's it.
At least you're on the last slide.
Did they lose it or no? No, they're up there. They can do.
We're just having a technical difficulty. It wants me to talk faster. So again, in the areas of mental health and student behavior support for classrooms, also looking at school-based therapist position, and we're currently looking to fund that already through ESSER 3 funding in partnership with Northwestern. So our goal beyond ESSER, again, in 2024 would be for that to be a position that we fund through our local budget. And looking at school counselors, we're anticipating that the SOQs will increase the requirement for the number of school counselors. In terms of instructional support, we're working through staffing allocations to look at, do we need additional teachers and where do we need them? In addition to that, looking at instructional aides, we want to add another alternative education teacher to the tech center where we house that program. We've managed to get one for the remainder of this year and next year through ESSER funding, but again, we want to make that a permanent position in our local budget. We likely, because of, again, those SOQ requirements, are going to have to add some additional reading specialists. And one of the things that we've talked about that could be very helpful is to add some instructional coaches in our buildings to help teachers develop and implement instruction. In terms of organizational management and efficiency, we want to look at a data systems specialist position, which is helping us run PowerSchool. There's a lot of data that flows through PowerSchool. There's over 130 different state reports that have to be submitted. And right now that work is being done in a split position. I really feel it's in our benefit to make that a full-time position, because the other thing we want to do is turn PowerSchool into more of a useful system to help us be more efficient. And one of the ways it can do that is we collect forms and information from parents on PowerSchool. And it makes it easy for parents because they simply go into the portal, click a couple buttons, and they're done. They don't have to send paper in. They don't have to get a copy and sign it. It's all done electronically. But in order to do that, we have to have somebody to manage all of that. The other powerful piece of PowerSchool that we need to take better advantage of is the data tool that's attached to it. It can talk to us about attendance data, discipline data, instruction, grades, all kinds of different pieces of information. While we're using those, we can use them much better than we are now. But again, we need somebody to help us with that system. And that's not a criticism of current staff. That's just a measure of time and how much time people have to do things. So that's going to be a recommendation that we'll potentially put forward depending on where things go to make that a full-time position. And then we've talked about this before, about taking our substitute system and putting it online, so that it has a system where it can call and fill those positions. It takes that work off of our school secretaries in the morning when they're trying to help and provide customer service in many cases, but it also makes us more efficient in that process. It makes it easier for teachers. It makes it easier for our staff on the back end and payroll and benefits, but it also gives us a lot of data that we can then pull that information and help to make better decisions for us and our personnel across the division. And then we always want to continue to look at different facility upgrades that we need to do, whether that's upkeep, the management, or building and making new things across our schools and our facilities. So those are our long list of priorities. And as we start to develop and see where funding, we'll begin to narrow those down and give you more specific in terms of what they exactly are and how much they cost. So that's just an update for you on the start of this process. Happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
I saw on that list you had a lot of social worker, different counselors.
Mhm.
So how does that work when you're talking to people in the state education system? Are they mining data from you guys from local areas on what's going on when it comes to student mental health and those type things that's happening right now?
I would say yes and no. I would say no because I don't think the system is set up to do that on a daily basis. But there are some, we send in discipline reports, we send in attendance reports to the state, and they monitor some of those things. There are also the climate and school safety surveys that are done every year at different schools, and there is some information there. Our school counselors meet multiple times throughout the year annually as a collective group across the state, and they submit a lot of information. But in terms of a actual system that's monitoring and getting information, there's nothing set up statewide for that. We do
That's for threat assessment numbers.
Yeah,
and
we
stuff.
send in information in our discipline report that we send every year. If we do threat assessments, those are documented in Power School, so that gets reported. Did that answer your question?
From somebody that's currently waiting on the master schedule collection to be done so they can get the IPAL report for Title I, I will definitely support your data system specialist because, I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, Power School is just grades, but there are so many different facets to that can be used. I mean, you could start doing online registration, things and it maintains everything for you. So it is very important, and it is a several man job in some divisions.
Well, the part that I think is important to note is we're a small school division, but we're still responsible for the same number of reports and things that the division, say the size of Fairfax, is responsible for. The state doesn't say, oh, you're small, you only have to do these ones. We have to do them all. And it's very time intensive work. And we want to get it right because that often is some of that stuff is tied to funding.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't make mistakes on that. There's special education reports that are very, very critical to what we do, not only for our students in terms of them, but the funding that's tied to it. So it's a critical system for us.
I had two other things. Was Paige able to secure either retention or recruitment federal grants that just came out? Because some of them were invitation only. So I didn't know if Paige was eligible for the teacher one.
I don't think so. We got the one for the national board certified, and we got the school bus driver.
Yeah, that was disappointing.
Yes. Yeah, we were expecting to get the full
50,000.
amount we submitted, and then they ended up.
Yeah, we got a fourth. So
Yeah.
and
But
then
we got something, so we'll take that.
I will say after 3 years sitting here, I finally have a superintendent that understands the importance of aligning your ADM. Because the last 2 years that was a point of contention. So,
Well, like
you.
I said, I have good staff leading me, and I tend to take a conservative approach with that because I'd rather have excess money than be in the hole
right.
for
Gotcha.
something. Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Fox.
You're welcome.
You're up again for the superintendent's update.
Yep, and I'll talk faster this time, and hopefully our computer will cooperate. I just want to begin tonight. We want to take a moment to thank our local law enforcement partners. They've been absolutely incredible all year, but I will say that this past week when we needed them the most, they have stepped up the most. So we want to say thank you to the Page County Sheriff's Office. We want to say thank you to the Luray Police Department, the Shenandoah Police Department, and the Stanley Police Department. Each of them in their own ways are supporting us, not only just through our SRO program, but again, when we have situations like we've had this past week, I will say to you, they have all stepped up, and we just want them to know how grateful we are for that support. In terms of our health data, we just did this last Thursday, so I will move quickly through this. Some changes, but for the most part, we're still there. You can see the trend with the Omicron virus. It's starting to kind of come down a little bit. We did have a little bump again, but it's starting to come down. In terms of our total number of cases per 100,000, we are sitting right now at 1,170. So again, just exceedingly high numbers. We haven't seen those kind of numbers before. In terms of the percentage of positive PCR tests, we're sitting at 43.5%. Again, very, very high. We'd like to get that number back down to single digits like it was back in August for us. That then gives us our indicator for community transmission is still at the high level, and we've been there pretty much all year. In terms of vaccine coverage, you can see there that we are, Page County is at 55.1%, and that's of the adult population that's fully vaccinated. The state's at 78.8%. I have added a new column there for you this week because we now have data that shows not only who's fully vaccinated, but the percentage of people in Page County who are now boosted with the third dose. So you can see those percentages there, and we anticipate that those will continue to increase over time. In terms of our COVID dashboard, right now we are sitting at 78 total active cases across the division. And again, we do hope to see that that decreases very soon. Our level of school impact, this is that chart that we've now been showing you for a couple of weeks. You can see in terms of transmission within the school, in terms of outbreaks, we have Page County Middle School, Page County High School are at the high level. So that means they have 3 or more outbreaks happening. I believe that's right, Mr. Pitts. Is it 3? Thank you. 4. Thank you. In terms of student absenteeism, we're seeing Luray Elementary Schools at the high level. And right now, in terms of staff capacity, everybody is sitting at low or medium. So that's a good thing because last week we were sitting at some schools in terms, they were at high capacity there. And this is just a different chart to kind of show you from when we started school where we've been in terms of our COVID cases over time. So you can see that first peak there on the left, that was our September hit when we got, and then we went down a little bit, and now you can see where we are in terms of the number of cases based on the Omicron variant. And then just a couple of additional updates for you tonight. We wanted to share publicly that on January 1st, we did have an increase to our substitute pay. And so that information will be posted on our webpage and updated. But we are moving for our teachers with an active license from $89 a day to $103 a day. Our goal is to increase that more for next year. This is just to get us through the remainder of this year. And you can see those increases there. So again, we ask anybody out there who's interested in substituting for us to please come and submit an application, and now they'll see that they can earn more money per day. Again, we hope to increase that next year as well, to increase those amounts for people in order to attract more people. In response to Ms. Lawson's question tonight, we do have an update for you on our grading practices. We did deploy that survey to all of our faculty and staff in December of 2021. We received about 114 responses. Our division staff are reviewing the information to provide us with an update on grading practices to include that 50%. I will say to you, I don't have an update for you tonight simply because of the number of interruptions that we've had, whether they've been weather-related, COVID-related, or other related. But our staff is working on that, and we will bring that information to you at the first meeting in February. And we just wanted to highlight some good news because we need that too in terms of the great things that are happening in our school division, because they are. We don't need to lose sight of that. Our school board association has a section in their newsletter that they put out each month called Division Spotlight. And this month, Page County Public Schools was acknowledged. Another technical glitch. You're getting good at it. Excuse me, the division spotlight highlighted our, Youth Page Alliance for Community Action, or our YPACA group. And it talked about the partnership with our students in Page County Public Schools and the work that they've been doing since last summer. So we are very, very proud of that. We're excited to highlight that work because that's student work. That's stuff that our kids are doing to make our community better. So thank you to everyone associated with that effort. It was pushed out earlier today for everybody, so please take a moment to go read that and congratulate our students and staff. And thank you, Ms. Gordon, for your work with PACA and association there. We do want to announce, and we'll send out an email to everyone, but those staff that had signed up, we are, because of the weather tomorrow, we're going to reschedule our vaccine booster clinic from tomorrow to February 18th. We'll still be at the Page County Technical Center from 3:30 to 5:30. It's not too late to sign up, so if you want to get in touch with Mr. Pitts, and he will make sure you get on that list. I know everybody's anxiously awaiting for us to make a decision about the weather tomorrow. We did send out a message earlier today that we wanted families and staff just to potentially prepare for an early dismissal if needed. And we will either communicate any changes to that by 8 o'clock tonight or by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So we'll check forecasts and things. We want to make sure we're keeping everybody safe. And then finally tonight, the last thing I have for you all is we, in February, we want to celebrate kindness. So we're designating February. Hey guys. And putting out a kindness campaign for the month of February. And just different activities across the division in schools and in the community where we want to promote, encourage, and demonstrate the power of kindness. How we talk to each other, how we interact with each other, how we can disagree gracefully, and how we just want to make the world a better place. And we are obligated to teach our students that, and in many times they teach us that. But in February, we're going to do that, so we invite all of our parents, our community members, and anyone to join us. Those activities will be posted on our web pages, through social media, and on our division app. And so we just encourage everybody to please join us in celebrating and acknowledging and encouraging and promoting kindness in February. And then continuing, it's not just for the month of February.
Oh, man.
But thank you, that's all I have for you all this evening. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. We look forward to the kindness campaign. 9.01, can I have a motion to approve the VSBA Code of Conduct?
I'll make a motion that we approve the VSBA Code of Conduct.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Sullivan Smoot and a second by Mr. Painter to approve the VSBA Code of Conduct.
Mr. Gubler. Mr. Lansbury.
Yes.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan Smoot.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes. 9.02, approval of claims for payment. Ms. Seacrest?
Good evening, Board. You all have been provided with the claim certification or the operating fund of $197,909.96. Food service, $17,925.47. Total expenditures, $215,835.43. Along with that, you've been provided with the list of claims as well as the check registers. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer.
Can I have a motion to approve the claims for payment as presented?
I make a motion to approve the claims for payment as presented by Ms. Seacrest.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Painter and a second by Mr. Lansbury to approve the claims for payment as presented.
Mr. Lansbury.
Yes.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Mr. Gubler. Mrs. Sullivan Smoot.
Yes.
Ms. Gordon.
Yes. 9.03, approval of purchase orders over 10,000, Ms. Seeger?
Yes, Board, we have one purchase order for your approval this evening over 10,000. It is for the purchase of a new truck at $34,445. We would be using local transportation funds. The truck would be used by our maintenance department, and I believe if you have any other questions, myself or Mr. Williams will do our best to answer those for you.
Kind of cheap, actually.
Can't believe it's 34.
Yeah.
Well, we were lucky to even find them. Right now, it's hard to find anything. So,
I make a motion that we approve the purchase order over 10,000 presented by Ms. Seacrest.
Second.
A motion by Dr. Painter and a second by Mr. Painter to approve the purchase order over 10,000.
Mr. Painter,
Yes.
Dr. Painter.
Yes.
Mr. Gubler, Mr. Lansbury.
Yes.
Mrs. Sullivan Smoot,
Yes.
Ms. Borden.
Yes. Thank you. 9.04, approval of overnight field trips. Mr. Benson?
Good evening, school board members. We do have an overnight field trip request from Page County High School. This trip request is for the end of February and has them traveling to Virginia Tech for their FFA competitions. We have 12 students included, and we do have the right number of chaperones, so we feel like there'll be the supervision that we need for students. We'd ask for your approval this evening.
I'll make a motion to approve the overnight field trip, request to
Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech from Page County High School.
Second.
So, motion by Mrs. Sullivan Smoot and a second by Mr. Painter to approve the overnight field trip as requested.
Dr. Painter,
When do we discuss before we vote? I mean, because I have questions.
You can ask questions now.
Okay.
You can ask question.
Like, I don't know that we've had an overnight field trip with more than one kid yet this year, right?
Right.
So how does this fall in our health plan? Like, how many stay together? Things like that. Because of COVID and stuff.
we just try to follow similar precautions that we use in the school, and we also, our kids have to follow where they're going, what they lay out as the precautions for COVID or the requirements that they have, based on where the activity is and what they're doing. Is that what
Okay.
you're asking?
See, like, in our division, we do, like, they have to pass a rapid COVID test if they're going to stay in a room with someone else before. I'm just asking what's in our health.
We don't have anything in the health plan that outlines that sort of
Okay.
idea.
I would think, Dr. Painter, once we get that testing program up and moving, and we can add things like that to it to help us in terms of making decisions moving.
Yeah, I was just curious because, because usually they room together and things, and I just didn't know what our policy was. Thank you, Mr. Benson.
Yeah. Well, I think what we'll do, Dr. Fox, we'll put out something to building administration to say, if you're submitting an overnight field trip request at this point, please give us further details about how the rooming accommodations are going to work. And so we'll have those details, so we can be prepared to present that information as well. So we'll go ahead and do that.
Are there
From
any
now on.
requirements by where they're going? Have they set forth any requirements? Because that might be a thing too.
Well, as we said, it's on the campus of Virginia Tech, so we will follow their lead. I mean, in terms of what
Because they
want us
require
to do.
vaccines for their
Right.
students, so.
Exactly.
And I know the group that we're taking next week, that conference required vaccines also. The conference itself required vaccination. We had a motion and a second.
Dr. Painter,
Yeah.
Mr. Gubler, Mr. Lansbury,
Yes.
Mr. Painter,
Yes.
Mrs. Sullivan Smoot,
Yes.
Ms. Borden.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. 9.05, approval of COVID sick leave, GCDD.
Thank you. So what I've shared with you this evening, and we've had some conversations about this ongoing, is an outline of a process that's very, very similar to the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, or the FFCRA leave that was in place last year through March of 2021, where staff who were impacted by COVID could submit to get leave back or use COVID sick leave instead of their own sick leave. So the way we've set this up is it mirrors that process in terms of it would allow staff to be eligible for up to 10 days of leave based on those qualifying reasons. And those reasons, again, are very similar to what you saw in the FFCRA. So it's that an employee is diagnosed with or tests positive for COVID-19. They may be subject to quarantine or isolation as a result of it. They might have been advised by a healthcare provider to quarantine. They may be experiencing symptoms, COVID-like symptoms, and need to go see a doctor. Or they might be caring for a child or an immediate family member who's been diagnosed. And then we did add in, because we had to do those school closures back in September and one in December, that we wanted to include that as a different provision for this COVID leave that they could apply for. We've set up a process for it being retroactive, so this would be for any leave that the staff qualifies for beginning on July 1st, 2021 through the end of this school year on June 30th, 2022. And we've outlined for staff there's 2 ways that we need them to do this. So from July 1st through the end of January, it's a paper process where they'll submit a COVID leave request form. And then beginning February 1st next week, they'll enter that leave in Talent Ed under the FFCRA category, like they do any other leave that they use during the school year. And then that'll be approved based on our processes in human resources, payroll, and so forth. At this time, we're not requiring staff to present us with documentation, because many times at the school level, when they put in sick leave, they're providing documentation. But we have put in there at any time, if we do need to request documentation from a staff member, we can do so. We've also put in a piece for extenuating circumstances. The part about this that's going to be hard is there's so many different scenarios and personal situations that have taken place over the course of the year. There's no way for us to begin to figure out which and how many and what they are. So we have a piece in here where a staff member who feels that they would like to be considered for something that may not be written on this regulation, they can provide us with extenuating circumstances, attach it to the form, and our Human Resources Office will consider it. We've also created a form for staff to ask questions about this, related to this, because we know it can be kind of confusing and new. So we're asking staff to use that form to direct their questions there rather than flooding their principal's email or human resources. Put the questions there. We've created an FAQ that we will continue to update, and if there are personal questions that we need to respond to, we'll respond to those individually. I've given you a copy of the application or the request form that the staff are going to be asked to submit. We are doing this in paper just because right now that's the most efficient way. This would be something, if we ever did this again, that would potentially be done in Power School or in Talent Ed. And then I've just given you a copy of, this is just a superintendent's regulation. It is only applicable for this school year. But I've given you a copy of the attaching staff leave and absence policy that it would reference. But again, it's only good for this year. So on June 30th of 2022, this would expire. So what I'm asking for tonight is your approval of that regulation. And then what we will do is push this information out to staff and begin the process of collecting the request forms and returning that leave to staff, and or some staff might actually they were docked leave without pay, they would get that pay back.
I guess the question I have is on the the last day. That's not going to encompass summer school if we have to have summer school, right? You're going to be...
It could, because essentially they could submit a leave request through June the 30th. Now, what we'll have to decide moving forward from July 1st for that portion of summer school is whether we continue this next year.
Okay, all right.
And just let me add one clarification, I apologize. The funding for this is likely going to come out of ESSER 3 funding, so there shouldn't be any local funds that are impacted by this.
I make a motion that we approve the 21-22 COVID-19 sick leave option. As
Second.
presented.
Second.
A motion by Mrs. Sullivan Smoot and a second by Dr. Painter to approve the COVID-19 sick leave option as presented.
Mr. Gubler.
Yes.
Mr. Lansbury.
Yes.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Dr. Painter. Yes. Mrs. Sullivan Smoot.
Yes.
Ms. Borden.
Yes. 10.01, board members discussion time.
I would just like to thank those of you who presented reports tonight. I don't think anybody realizes all the information you all have to process, trying to put something together that is feasible to benefit all. And it's just amazing. So I just want to say we appreciate the time and effort. And again, I don't think anybody realizes all the reports, and in addition to everything else that goes on every single day. So great job. Keep up the good work, and thank you.
So, if I can, we had our Page County Technical Foundation meeting the other night. Mrs. Jackie was there, and very impressive folks that are very interested in our programs, and we have a great opportunity, I believe, and we're going to navigate through that. What I loved about it was my former principal, high school principal, was there, and my former elementary teacher, and she was former superintendent of our schools, was there as well, and a lot of business leaders, and I know Miss Jackie and her brother were there as well. So thanks to everybody that's involved, and we just got a great opportunity, I believe, with our students that are interested in this. This weekend, the rec center, we're going to have a trauma training that we've invited and hooked up with the school system. I think some counselors, and Miss Owens is going to be there, so looking forward to that. And I'm going to hope to learn something as well. And I'd like to, I know we've tried to held off on visiting schools, but I think we need to have more opportunities for the school board to get out to the schools. You learn a lot, I think, when you're out there. And I would like to, ask Mr. Benson if he could focus on the instruction and when we're doing that kind of thing too. If we could start lining those things up, I think it's time to start doing that. The last thing I'd like to talk about is a couple principles here. One, what we do is about children. And it's time for the adults to start getting out of the way and allowing the children and work and focusing on the children. I was at a school this week talking to a principal, and before he comes out, he's carrying a little child who fell asleep, and their little sibling is holding his hand, and the mothers are out there on the other side waiting to get a hold of him. That's a pretty cool picture, and that's what I mean by being about the children again. We have a lot of good things that happen in our school system, and I'm looking forward one day, Dr. Fox, that you can start putting your efforts into really improving the school system and working with everybody, and not having to do the things that we've had to do. Not just this week, I'm talking about the weeks before. And I think when we start seeing the data that Mr. Benson has alluded to, we're going to need summer school. Because I tell you what, I guarantee you there's some, I've got the feedback I've gotten. The students do not know how to read or comprehend what they're reading. How can you answer questions when you're struggling with that, with the learning loss that we've had? And it's time for us to really get serious about these kids and teach them. Not that we haven't, we've worked hard, I know all that. I I appreciate everything, but there are some serious things there that I've heard that I think Mr. Benson knows it. We've got to work on those things, and as teachers know it. And it's beyond behavior. I mean, behavior is one thing. The knowledge and instruction, that's huge. And I think you have the skill set. That's why we hired you to come here, right? Because you're known for that. But I think you just haven't had the time to get into it because of everything else. And it's time to get back to the children. And that's the last time I'm going to say it, but I'm going to say it probably every meeting. Let's get back to the kids, folks, and on the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
A motion by Dr. Painter and a second by Mr. Painter to adjourn.
Mr. Lansbury,
Yes.
Mr. Painter,
Yes.
Dr. Painter,
Yes.
Mr. Gubler, Mrs. Sullivan Smoot,
Yes.
Ms. Bork.
Yes. The meeting is adjourned.